We will be returning to the MPI that we interrupted for Senator Martin's first speech, and I call Senator Lanehelm.
Thank you, Mr. President. According to popular legend, Hitler's master of propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, said, "A lie told once is still a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth." The claim that there have been no gun mass shootings since the introduction of John Howard's 1996 gun laws has probably been repeated many more than 1,000 times, which is perhaps why so many people believe it is the truth. But it was a lie when it was first told, and it's still a lie now. In the 20 years following 1996, there were 14 shootings in Australia involving multiple victims. Of these, 12 involved 2 or 3 fatalities, 1 involved 4 fatalities and 1 5 fatalities. The death toll would have been higher, but for some luck and life-saving medical attention. In the 20 years before 1996, there were also 12 shootings involving multiple victims, although there were more deaths in total. According to America's FBI, a mass shooting is defined as 4 or more people shot and or killed in a single event at the same general time and location, not including the shooter. In 2014, there was a mass shooting in New South Wales involving the Hunt family, in which there were 4 victims plus the shooter. This qualifies as a mass shooting under the FBI definition. Yet a couple of academics, Philip Alpers and Simon Chapman, who are in fact foundation members of the anti-gun lobby, recently wrote a paper in which they repeated the lie that there had been no mass shootings in Australia since 1996. But under their definition, a mass shooting required at least 6 victims, including the shooter. And they gained some publicity for themselves as a result of making this claim. But the simple fact is they arbitrarily changed the definition of a mass shooting to suit their agenda. Very few Australians will recognise the fabrication involved in the claim. Most of those claiming there have been no mass shootings since 1996 have never thought much about it. For them, it sounds sufficient to claim that massacres occurred before the gun laws but not after, and they then draw the simple conclusion that the gun laws made the difference. It might be simplistic, but it sounds compelling, and it's false. There were just as many multiple victim shootings in the 20 years before the 1996 gun laws as there have been in the 20 years after they were introduced. But really, is that all that matters? Is there something special about being murdered in a mass shooting, unlike being shot in some other way or even killed in some other way? Obviously not. A far better analysis of the impact of the 1996 gun laws would be to look at the overall level of murders attributable to firearms. And when you do look at that, what you find is that firearm deaths were declining in the 20 years before 1996, and they continued to fall after 1996 at precisely the same rate. Precisely the same rate, and multiple statistical tests have confirmed that it is precisely the same rate. And furthermore, this occurred despite a substantial increase in licensed firearm ownership. Many more guns, in other words. The simple fact is the gun laws in 1996 made no difference to the rate of decline. No difference at all. Now, this no massacres, no mass shootings claim is also often accompanied by a comparison with the United States. There's no denying the US does have mass shootings. Australia doesn't, or not many anyway, therefore it must be the gun laws that explain it, or so the argument goes. It's simple-minded claptrap. It's so dumb that it's amazing anyone falls for it, and yet you hear it all the time. And once again, the facts are ignored, notwithstanding the high-profile mass shootings that do occur from time to time in the United States, the rate of gun deaths in that country during the last 3 decades has declined fast, quite fast, faster indeed than in Australia, albeit from a higher starting point. And at the same time, over the same period, gun laws in America have been substantially relaxed. In fact, in 42 states, over that 30 years, a person can now, without a criminal record or violent history, can carry a gun for self-defence. And in the other 8 states, a gun can be carried in case of special need. And of course, nobody bothers to compare us with countries such as New Zealand that continue to have gun laws resembling those that were found in Australia before 1996, but that, like us, continue to see falling gun deaths. Or Switzerland, which has a far higher ratio of guns to people than Australia, and yet its rate of gun violence is no greater than Australia. And the assumption is made, if we relaxed our gun laws to be more like those in New Zealand or Switzerland, we'd end up like America, not like New Zealand or Switzerland. It's an absurd assumption. I'm all for debate about gun laws, but let's stick to incontrovertible facts, not those that become facts because they have been repeated many times.
Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak in support of the continuing strength of Australia's gun laws, and indeed I would like to see gun laws strengthened. I'll say up front, I can't ever remember a time when I wasn't opposed to guns, even as a small child, and certainly as a parent. I went to great lengths to try and educate my children about the dangers of guns. Now, I appreciate in some parts of Australian society we do have guns. Guns are needed on farms, our police force carry guns, and so on. Our armed forces carry guns. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the everyday carrying or use of guns by ordinary citizens. I simply don't see the point, and I don't support the use of guns. And we see that, we see in the shocking deaths in the US, where we've had thousands of school children taking to the streets to say that they want to make their schools safe. I mean, what a sad indictment in a country where some children feel that it's no longer safe to go to schools. Our schools should be sanctuaries, and yet for some children they are not. I don't really think it matters if gun violence and deaths from shootings are declining. What matters is that they're happening in the first place. Any death through a shooting is a shocking thing, and we should all as a society be opposed to that. I certainly don't support young children being able to get gun licences, as is the case in some states across this country. I'm proud to say that in Western Australia you have to be 18 years of age to get a gun licence. In Western Australia, if you've got a history of domestic violence, you also can't get a gun licence. If you've got an issue around mental health, again. But really our gun laws should be uniform across this country, and what applies in one state should be the case in another state, because we don't want to see people being able to take advantage in one state where they can't in another. I've never been a fan of John Howard's, never, ever, ever, but his bravery on standing up after Port Arthur needs to be commended. And I remember seeing him on the news being absolutely heckled by people who thought they had some right to carry arms by the National Rifle Association, which is way, way, way too influential in our politics these days, particularly in state politics. So he did a great job, but what we've seen since then is the watering down of gun laws, of it starting to become easier. And we don't want that. We don't have that history of the right to bear arms the gun violence that we see in the US, and we certainly don't want to see that in Australia as a rule. But certainly we've seen with the Labor government in Western Australia, and I commend my friend and colleague Michelle Roberts, who is concerned that in Western Australia that we have seen a spike in drive-by shootings and woundings, and so she's taken action on that, and she's looking at some of the recommendations by the WA Law Reform Commission to introduce what are known as firearm prohibition orders, which already exist in other states. But again, I think that gun violence should be something where we simply have national standards, so that for every state and territory in this nation there's a uniform provision around gun laws. And I have to say I was quite shocked to learn that there are differences, and I was really shocked to hear that in some states young children of 10 years of age can go and be given a gun licence, presumably to shoot on a range somewhere, but that's just inappropriate. Why we would want to introduce our children to guns at such an early age defies logic as far as I'm concerned. And I want to make sure that Australia remains a safe country, that we don't have guns being freely available. I do admit that they are somewhat freely available at the moment, but the more we can clamp down, the stronger our laws can be on stopping guns, and the more that we as a culture embrace the fact that we don't want to see guns in this country, the better off we'll be.
Well, you need to seek the call, Senator Griff. Senator Griff.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Chair or President. The Nick Xenophon team agrees with the need to strengthen our firearms laws to reduce gun violence. Indeed, we could have had stronger gun laws last year when the government's Criminal Code Amendment Firearms Trafficking Bill 2017 was amended and adopted by the Senate in February 2017. That's now over 13 months since the nation could have had tougher, stronger and better gun laws, but due to government stubbornness, the bill, as agreed to by the Senate, was rejected in the other place. And as a result, we do not have those laws in place today. The Nick Xenophon teams sought to strengthen the bill by moving sensible amendments that would have increased the maximum penalties for firearms trafficking offences within Australia and into and out of Australia. As I said before, these amendments were supported by the Senate. We also supported Labor's amendments that sought to strengthen the bill with life sentences for the worst kind of firearms traffickers, and which also sought to remove the mandatory sentencing provisions in the bill. Mandatory minimum sentences are inappropriate and do not currently exist in the Commonwealth Criminal Code. They restrict judicial discretion and hamper the sentencing judge's ability to hand down a sentence that is appropriate after taking into account all of the circumstances of an individual case. Mandatory minimum sentences depart with the fundamental principle that the punishment should fit the crime. Law enforcement agencies don't like mandatory minimum sentences because it means offenders are less likely to cooperate with the police to bring down other serious criminals. Illegal firearms remain a major issue in Australia. During last year's National Firearms Amnesty, 57,324 firearms were handed in. 57,324. Authorities received around 2,500 fully automatic or semi-automatic guns that were previously unaccounted for and 2,900 handguns. That is a lot of firepower that had the potential to cause very serious harm. All of us in this place must work to keep our communities safe. We must support tougher sentences for gun traffickers. The government should have passed the bill as it was agreed to in the Senate. It is now time to stop playing political games with people's lives and for the government to take the right action to protect all Australians.
Senator Anning.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. This MPI is another example of an attack on our individual freedoms, thinly veiled as a progressive solution to gun-related violence. The real solution to gun-related crime is to target criminals who use illegal weapons to commit acts of violence with effective jail terms and not law-abiding licensed gun owners. Australians already have some of the strictest gun laws in the world, yet our rate of gun crime is still similar to that of New Zealand. We have legislation that allows firearms to be banned just for their appearance, not their effective range, rate of fire or capacity, but how they look. They can be banned just because they look scary. This is verging on irrational. Our firearm laws, according to Senator Rhiannon, are the envy of the world, yet they are still advocating for stricter controls. For example, the banning of the Adler shotgun, a firearm that many rural Queenslanders have had to use, making a tough life on their cattle places that little bit tougher. Firearms aren't the issue, people are. If you are a radical or a lunatic who wants to kill innocent people, they will find a way. As we have seen in Burke Street, the radical in France who took the pavement in a truck, or the London Bridge attack. Those that are hell-bent on causing terror and harming innocents will. But by that same token, however, if you drive your van on the sidewalk and kill people, are we going to ban vans? What about if you go on a stabbing spree? Are we going to ban knives? Increasing the already chokingly restrictive gun control isn't going to change the outcome of our nation. What we need is a clearer focus on those that commit crimes, not more firearm controls. There are approximately 34,000 gun-related deaths each year in America, 94% of which are committed by criminals with illegal weapons. A change in the gun laws will not get the desired result, desired outcome. They are already outside the regular framework. The bottom line is overwhelmingly gun-related violent criminals using unlicensed firearms. Changing the legislation has no more effect on the rate of gun crime rate than watering your geraniums. Look at Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans. They have some of the strictest gun laws in the US and the highest murder rates. There is a common misconception that an increase in registered firearms means you are going to see more gun violence perpetrated across the community. Once again, law-abiding gun owners are being targeted and victimised simply for owning firearms. To reiterate, a real solution to gun...
Order, Senator. Your
Thank you.
time has expired. Senator Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I speak in support of this matter of public importance. It is now over 20 years since the horrendous massacre in Port Arthur in Tasmania, and it is very important that we remain as vigilant as ever not to allow our gun laws to be weakened and indeed in some cases believe they need to still be further strengthened. And it's particularly concerning to me and to the Greens more broadly, as colleague Senator Rhiannon mentioned in her comments, about the increasing amount of money that the gun lobby is pouring into Australian politics and towards Australian political parties. In my own state of Queensland, it's very clear that the cashed-up gun lobby tried to buy the results it wanted in the Queensland election. The Queensland Shooters Union were affiliated with the notorious NRA in the US, threw thousands into the campaigns of One Nation candidates. The Katter Party received over $175,000 from one particular gun dealer, and the Electoral Commission's disclosure system showed that in total the Katter Party received nearly $500,000 from firearms interest groups. The Shooting Industry Foundation of Australia spent over $500,000 itself on TV, radio and online advertising trying to get a weakening of the gun laws in Queensland. Just like the NRA, the Queensland Shooters Union and the Shooting Industry Foundation of Australia are not merely gun enthusiasts concerned about their rights. I support sporting shooters and their rights to conduct legitimate activities. I support farmers and their right to use firearms appropriately in the course of their business. but what these lobby groups are about is trying to expand the firearms industry. In the US, the NRA buys politicians to protect the profits of the arms industry. That is something that cannot be disputed. And unless we move urgently to reform our own political donation system, we could see the same here. The lives of our friends, families, children and loved ones can be potentially sacrificed for profit. So we need to ensure that we ban political donations from the gun lobby. The Greens' view is that we should be banning political donations from all for-profit corporations, but particularly for industries that seek to promote profits in areas that are harmful. The Queensland Government has made a small advance in moving to ban donations from property developers. Has been shown quite directly to corrupt our political system. Surely, in areas such as this, the gun lobby in particular is an industry we need to be banning donations from.
Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much, Mr Acting Deputy President. The demonising of law-abiding gun owners is unhelpful to the debate about violence in this country. The time for bashing gun owners must stop. Many law-abiding Australians responsibly use firearms to work, hunt and for sport, and this needs to be taken into consideration. A gun to a farmer is what a wrench is to a plumber, a tool that, if removed, makes the business unworkable. A farmer's central job is to protect the environment, to make the land profitable and productive. There is no greater threat to our precious environment than feral pests such as wild pigs, foxes, cats, dogs and rabbits. If the Greens want to contribute to this debate in a productive way, they could analyse and honestly discuss the existing laws. Existing laws state that only licensed gun dealers can trade or sell guns. Adverts for guns are very closely monitored. The police work with gun traders and are tough on illegal gun sales, as they should be. If the Greens were serious about stopping gun violence, they would look at resourcing police. The trouble with guns is when they get into the hands of criminals. The logical extension to solving gun violence is resourcing the police so they can find illegal arms dealers and bring them to justice. Mr President, Australians have been lawfully and reasonably carrying weapons for a variety of reasons for generations. New laws introduced over recent years have made owning a gun even tougher. Law-abiding citizens are not the problem with guns, criminals are. They are the ones who the Greens should focus on, not law-abiding gun owners.
Thank you. Time for this debate has now expired. I shall now proceed to the consideration of documents which are listed on page 4 of today's order of business. They are all government documents, so we might deal with the first 7. Senator Bartlett.
President, I was going to move to take note of all 7. The documents and the government responses are all related, so all those 7 and the following 7 perhaps collectively, just to save time.
Okay, let's do it as...
Keen to be efficient.
And do you intend to speak to any of them?
I do. I'll speak to them together, if that's okay.
And will you be seeking leave to continue your remarks on all of them or none of them?
Seeking to speak to them.
All right, okay. Thank you.
So I would move to take note of all of these documents collectively by leave.
Is leave granted? There being no objection, leave is granted.
Speak to each
Senator
of 14 of them separately if people would prefer.
No, we don't.
These are 7 reports from the Commonwealth Ombudsman in regards to people who have been in immigration detention in Australia for 2 years or more, a provision that was inserted in the Migration Act when the Coalition was in government back prior to the Rudd-Gillard years, because of a recognition of how out of control our detention system was. So there's 7 reports here from the Commonwealth Ombudsman and 7 responses from the Minister. And rather than go through each of the individual cases, I'd simply point out that collectively these reports refer to 222 individuals who have all been in detention in Australia for over 2 years, some of them more than 3, some of them more than 4, some over 5 years. These are truly people who are forgotten, locked away. Let's not forget, despite never having committed a crime, despite not ever being charged for a crime, locked up indefinitely by virtue of our laws, which unfortunately Labor and Liberal have continued to support, the mandatory detention regime that's been in place in this country, to our shame, for over 25 years. And I wanted to particularly mention the fact that a family from my own state of Queensland who are now currently in detention in Melbourne. They've only recently come there. I really hope and pray that in 2 years' time there's not a report tabled about them still being in detention. I talk about a family who were taken from